There were kind of two parts in the last interview we didn't get to, and I gave you forewarning that I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your brother-in-law, because that's quite an experience, and we could probably do a full podcast off of it, but obviously it influences this bill in particular. Share a little bit about that. I mean, people who may not know, honestly did not realize that he was your brother-in-law until I did a little research before our first podcast. That's when I discovered that. I was like, whoa.
So who we're talking about is Blake Snyder.
That's right.
Is my brother-in-law. He married my sister Elizabeth, and I love talking about him. Number one, because he's worth talking about, and he's worth remembering. He made the ultimate sacrifice, and he did so willingly, which is a uniquely honorable thing in our culture and throughout the annals of time, is when, Jesus said, greater love has no one than this, than he who lays down his life for his friend, right? And Jesus was articulating something very specific, which is your greatest gift, the greatest thing that you will ever have, is the life that God gave you. He gave you life. He gives us air to breathe, and he keeps our heart beating. It is not by our own power that you and I sit here today. It is because it is according to his will he allows us to engage. And our destiny is entwined to that, both when we're born, all of our experiences, and the very day and moment of our death and departure. And when you start thinking about that, it's heavy, right? Because how are you going to spend your time? How are each of us going to spend the time that we're given? And when somebody uses that time to sacrifice and to serve others, it's worth remembering, particularly when they voluntarily give that up in order to save the life of another person. And so when we talk about being a legislator or past experiences with the police world or anything that we're working on, priorities and the life issue, this is what our experiences in our life, they form us. And some of them will forever alter you. We've talked about some of those things that you've experienced and I've experienced, and this is one of those things. That's why I'm so passionate about the life issue. That's why I'm so passionate about things that actually matter, because so much in our world today doesn't matter, but this actually does. And so Blake Snyder, worth remembering. I love him, and I can't wait to see him again one day. I have a lot to say to him. And he marries my sister Elizabeth. Now, he's a graphic designer by trade. Okay?
Really? I did not know that.
Yes.
Okay.
Very talented, by the way. Very talented digital art. And he's working at a church that we were attending. And he falls in love with my sister Elizabeth. And I love Blake from the very beginning. He was sweet and quiet and just so crazy about Elizabeth, which was most important to me. And that he loved the Lord. He had a relationship with Jesus, with God. He knew who he served. He knew his eternal salvation and where he would end up for eternity. All of which checked all the boxes, And the thing about it was, he saw my father, who was a former policeman, and I was a current policeman, and our uncle, Elizabeth's uncle, is a policeman. And he became enamored with the life of sacrifice because he saw something bigger. He saw there was something more to life. He became convinced that he was destined to be part of something greater than himself. And when that seed starts to grow, it's almost impossible to put out. And I even tried. I legitimately tried because, he was in the police academy. And coming from his background, it was not the typical law enforcement background or the military background. It was graphic design. So he was completely different. He was so sweet and loving. And gosh, man, he was in the police academy, and we had to watch these. You have to watch these videos where essentially they take a live pig and they slice the arteries, an arterial bleed of a pig, and it's extremely graphic. The blood squirts everywhere, and the whole idea is that you overcome that natural physical reaction, human reaction, and then are able to very clearly see how you can close off the artery, use a tourniquet, and stop the bleeding, and so the pig won't die, right? This is a pig that's going to be slaughtered anyway, but they're doing this for training purposes. It's a graphic video, right? I mean, just brutal, because if you don't know this, pigs look just like human beings. I mean, inside, okay? We're all just basic biological animals in the inside of us, and it's gross. And so I remember Blake kind of like started to pass out, and I'm not even outing him. Like I'll have to apologize, I guess, one day, but I'm not outing him, because I tell you this story. One of his instructors was like, they got a hold of me and they were like, this is what happened in class. And I was like, oh yeah, that video is bad. And if you're kind of watching it on a light stomach, you know, you kind of have to be prepared for that. And if you come from a background where that's not, like, you're not a hunter, so you've never field dressed a deer, you know, that can be a little bit gross when you see that for the first time, right? It's very like, you know, a little overwhelming. And so I think, you know, he got lightheaded, you know, and they were like, this is a concern. He's going to see this in the real world, and it's true. And it's not going to be a pig. It's going to be human. Right. You're going to see the inside of people, and it's gross. It's horrible. And people kill themselves, and children, and sometimes children die. And these things are all traumatic. And without a good fundamental foundation in Christ, that's why a lot of policemen suffer mental illness. That's why a lot of policemen suffer with PTSD, and they sometimes take their own life, and their marriages suffer, because you have to know how to deal with trauma, and you have to know how to deal with it, heal from it, and who you are, right? And so many people don't, policemen included. So that's always their concern when they see something like that, what happened to Blake. So, you know, I called Blake and I said, you know, maybe this isn't for you. You know, maybe this isn't, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with that at all, because we all have a unique calling on our life, and it's important for you to find yours and what you're supposed to do. And basically, I was really trying to give it hard to him so that he wouldn't try to go into this job because for the glory or the prestige or the honor that is associated with a life of sacrifice for the wrong reasons. Something my father did to me when he knew that I wanted to be a police officer. You know, and it only strengthened his resolve.
That's awesome.
Yeah, which is awesome, because he was called to do it. He heard the call from the Lord. He heard the call, and nothing was going to dissuade him from this, which speaks to his character, of course, and his obedience, because he believed he was obeying the call of God on his life. And that's important, because of eventually what happened. Now, fast forward, he becomes a police officer in the 3rd precinct, Afton Southwest, which is great. And great people, you know, he enjoys the people, the precinct that he's serving in. And he immediately rises to become a very effective police officer. He's working the midnight shift because he's newer. He serves in Ferguson and the Ferguson riots. And he does so honorably, and countless stories of how he impacted lives, children, domestic violence. Like, he was exactly the policeman you wanted showing up. Passionate, caring, empathetic, and not prideful, arrogant, or, you know, calloused and cynical, you know, burned out. The exact opposite. And so he immediately becomes the officer that is always the one that's going to every single call. You know, he's so excited, and just all he wants to do at family events is talk about all the calls that he's gone on and the things that he's done. And he's so passionate. And when I would talk to him, I could see myself in him. He was so excited to do the job. It wasn't even a job. He would have done it for free, right? Because when you're called to do something like that and you enjoy it so much, it's no longer a job, you know? And he and Elizabeth they're newlyweds, and they have a little baby, Malachi, now. And they live over in Edwardsville, Illinois. And he's making this commute over to the Afton Southwest precinct. And Elizabeth really wants him to take a job, do something else, you know, take a job over in Edwardsville so he doesn't have to drive, and he doesn't have to work midnights and Christmases and holidays, right? It is a life of sacrifice. It is. And he prayed about it, and he told her that, you know, and this is Blake's personality. He would give Elizabeth anything. You know, he was always way too lenient on her, in my opinion, and would just spoil her to death. But that was his nature. But on this, this fundamental issue. He said, I don't believe the Lord's calling us to do that. I believe I'm where I'm supposed to be. It's very interesting that he believed that. Like he wasn't like he was just going about his daily thing and something bad happened. No, he specifically believed he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Interesting. And so she said, okay, wow. I mean, this was unlike Blake to be so adamant, right? And to know that I am where I'm supposed to be.
Right.
No matter what.
Right.
And even up until the week before the event, he's driving home from a midnight watch. It's very late, you know. He doesn't even feel tired, but he doesn't realize that he falls asleep at the wheel. Car goes off the embankment, flips over, could have easily been killed. He's not injured. He walks away.
Wow.
So he has this massive accident. Nobody else is injured. It's literally one car accident, but he falls asleep. The car goes off the side of the road, flips over, could have easily been killed. It was that bad. And he walks away completely unscathed.
Wow.
Crazy, right?
Absolutely.
Because the very next week, he's killed in the line of duty. He's ambushed and killed. The call that comes out that night is for a disturbance. The suspect is a young man who is a drug addict on lots of antidepressant, mind-altering drugs. From the trial, we now know these drugs that he was abusing, of Xanax and things like that. And he had told his dad earlier that day that he was going to essentially kill a policeman. He had said it on social media, and he showed his father that he had a firearm. And it bothered his father enough that his father contacted the police and said, he said this, but his father left out one very important part. His father did not say that he had bought a gun, that he was in possession of a firearm. And personally, I think his father will have to live with that decision for the rest of his life. And I think it was the wrong decision, obviously. And we could talk and speculate why he would or he would not tell the police, not only has my son said this, what he's intending to do, but he also has a firearm to carry it out. Would have been helpful information, wouldn't it have? But he didn't. He left that out. So when this disturbance comes out, Blake had already dealt with this young man before. He knew he was troubled, and the other officers in the precinct had known and dealt with this guy before as well. And so they had a previous relationship with him. They knew his history and his issues. He had gone to his ex-girlfriend's house. He had tried to kick the door in. They were afraid for their life, the girl and her mom, but he wasn't able to break the door down. So he returned to his vehicle where he was sitting when Blake arrived. But this was not Blake's call. Remember the type of officer Blake was. Blake was that guy that jumped the call, is what we used to call it. Jumping the call means the call comes out. It's not your call. You don't have to go, but you're going to go because you want to do some good. And he arrived before the officer that actually was dispatched got there. And so Blake arrived, contacted the suspect, and the suspect was waiting for him and got off one shot. And the shot was lethal. And then the responding officer, whose call it was, gets into a shootout with the suspect, and the suspect is injured, doesn't ultimately die. That started a process that is still to this day surreal to me and to our family, who I can only say, thank God we knew the Lord, and to have his presence, because I was also working that morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, because I had to get up really early. I was on the SWAT team, and we were about to execute a warrant up in the Ferguson area. And we were at staging location, and we're getting ready. We're getting prepared, putting our kits on. And somebody said, there's been a shooting in the 3rd precinct, or 3rd or 4th precinct. They didn't know which one. And they said, yeah, there's an officer got injured. And I said, what are you talking about? Because I know where Blake is. And I said, what do you mean? What happened? They said, I don't know. There's no details. They just know there's a shooting. And officer's injured, and it's okay, though, because they're taking him to St. Anthony's. And back then, St. Anthony's wasn't a trauma center, so it would have been a relatively minor, was what we assumed, that it would have been a minor injury if they're taking him to St. Anthony's, because they're not taking him to Mercy or Barnes, which is where you typically would go to a trauma one. And so something in me just froze, and I stopped. And I immediately sent a text to Blake, and I said, "Are you okay?" And I didn't get a response back. And something in me just knew. Something in me just knew that it was him. And so I jumped in my police car, turned the lights and sirens on, and started driving down to St. Anthony's. And as I drove, I'm trying to get on the phone with communications to get the latest information. They won't give me anything. But it was confirmed that Blake was injured. And so I'm like, what in the world happened? Like, what's going on? And when I finally got to the ER at St. Anthony's, I was met there by an officer a supervisor I had worked with for years. And I could see it in his face when he looked at me. He was dreading this moment. And then I knew. And I said, where is he? Where did he get hit? And he told me his face. And I thought, no, why is he at St. Anthony's? What in the world? And little did I know that, that staff at St. Anthony's was, fighting so valiantly to save his life. But the injury was so catastrophic. And what it had hit, the bullet had actually ricocheted and had hit the artery. It was an arterial bleed, which is extremely hard to stop. You would have had to be on scene and basically dug inside to stop that arterial bleed. Almost impossible. And at that point, it just started a process of having to, realize, what can I do at this point? And just a sound comes out of you, from a place that you didn't even know you had, of why wasn't I there? Why couldn't I stop it? This is not supposed to happen. I'm supposed to be the person that makes sure this never happens to him. I'm the person that signed his application to get hired as a police officer. I'm responsible for this. All these emotions and decisions are flooding over you, And now I have to go pick up Elizabeth over in Edwardsville and try to get her here as quickly as possible. So that's what I did. And got into a police car with another police officer, and we drove as fast as we could over to Edwardsville, and I'm calling Elizabeth, and I'm telling her what had happened, and she's freaking out, and I know. Even though they haven't told me yet, I know. And as we're getting closer, they're calling me. How close are you? How close are you? How close are you? And I look back at Elizabeth, and I told her, even in the car, because nobody wanted to say it. Nobody wanted to say it. And I just had to tell her, he's gone. And here it is. Elizabeth's a believer. I'm a believer. Blake's a believer. We know the Lord. We know the Lord can heal. We know God is a God of miracles. And yet, all I can tell you is, in situations like that, it's like you very clearly know the heart of the Lord. And he is there. It doesn't make the pain go away, but I never felt alone. I knew that he was there, and I knew that he wasn't going to change the outcome, even though I wanted him to. But I knew the answer was no. So that's really hard, because now I know I'm going to have to go through pain, and I'm going to have to go through my own pain. But worst is I'm going to have to go through her pain, and I'm going to have to be there with her, Elizabeth and Malachi, to walk through this journey with them. But God also knew that I was going to be put in that situation, called for that purpose in that time, just like I am right now, and just like you are, doing exactly what we're supposed to do. Part of our destiny. And so anyway, when we talk about these different things, that's one of those formative experiences in my life, and it still is like right here next to me, and it always will be.
I understand that 100%. I call them life-altering events that happen, marriage, first kid. Not that the other kids aren't important, but that first one is life-altering, in a way that you've never known. So there's certain things in your life, certain cornerstones that God allows pain, You know, first death that you experience, first death that you see. So, and so I can understand that very, very much. So from there, just a quick question: how's your sister and Malachi doing?
So yet another testament. You know, like I said, like you got the bad part, right? The tragic part, and it is tragic, because the pain and the loss never goes away. And just ask the family members, ask Blake's mom and dad. It just never. It's always with you.
Right.
But just like when I was talking about the bad part of the legislature, politics is dirty, whatever, is that there is light. That God is sovereign. He sits on his throne. He has a plan. So, and that's what we've been able to see with Elizabeth, because God sent her an amazing man, Jacob, who is just like Blake, unbelievably so. And it tailor-made for Elizabeth and Malachi, who is not a prideful, insecure man. Instead, he knew, I'm going to join this family with Elizabeth and Malachi and Blake. And Blake will never not be part of our family. Blake is as much a part of their family today as he ever could be by physically not being here. It's remarkable. And I give Jacob all the credit. I give God all the credit for bringing Jacob into our life. So Elizabeth has married Jacob, and they've had 2 more children since then. And, nothing is perfect. We're not perfect, and life is not perfect. But it's as close to perfect as you possibly can get from this situation. And so to others that I say maybe who are going through trauma or who have experienced trauma, particularly trauma like this, violent trauma, there is hope. Let me just speak to you. Jesus is real. God is real. Call upon him, and he will not let you down. He will be there with you. He will heal your heart. You who are hearing me right now, that you don't think that you could ever have a normal day again, much less normal week, month, year, or life. He is there for you. He wants to heal you. He will restore you to something greater than you didn't even think was possible. I am living testimony to it.
I think we can end there. I think ending on a hopeful period is good. I love it.
Got it.
Yeah, I like it. And that said, for those who've been listening, don't forget to support Justin. We need this guy to stay in office.
Yeah.
That does create money, and you can't fight the machine unless you have people having your back. So have his back. We'll have the links in the show notes, and I'm sure I'll put something across the screen like we did the last episode, so you guys can hop on, throw your support his way if God has led you to do so. Also pray. Prayer is important because everybody's tempted.
Amen.
And everybody needs wisdom, right? I mean, you look at Solomon. We want leaders that have wisdom. So pray for Justin. Pray for the upcoming legislation term that'll be happening here in Missouri. And if you're not in Missouri in your state, I'm sure it's coming up as well. So and in our country.
Amen.
We were talking about D.C. and we need God to move in mighty ways. We were talking even before we went on air that we need a great revival in this country. We need a great spiritual awakening. It's happened before in this country. It can happen again. And we need to see a renewal of hearts turned towards the Lord and knees bowed. And that's where real effective change in anywhere will come, when people are humble before the Lord.
Amen.
Hey, thanks for watching this short with us today. And if you like it, check out our full episodes on our channel and website. We'll put those in the links below. And as always, Scott,
like and subscribe, or subscribe and then like, whatever order you want, really.
Whatever order you like.
Yeah.
Thanks.